All right, we are live. I'm just going to give people some time to go ahead and come on in and join in. How are you guys doing? I have a guest on here today. So I'm just going to give everybody, just some time to hop on tonight. And we're going to talk about all things therapy, whatever, questions, whatever insight, that we can like give you, any like tips to the healing process. We want to make sure that we're going to give that to you. And so I want you guys to share this live stream and get people in the room so we can get into this conversation. I'm excited. So there are some things that, just from recapping our last topic, where, we just got into, a little deeper information. And we were just talking about, boundaries, talking about just being vulnerable. We talked about just a couple of different things when it comes to, the things that you need when it comes to like speaking up and making sure that you are taking care of what you need to take care of as far as like your healing process. So I see a couple of people coming on in the live, and so I'm just gonna wait before we introduce um our guest that I have on here with me. All right, let's get into it. Hi, everybody. I am Sean Wyatt. I am a therapist and a coach, and I have started this late night therapy conversations, just to bring like more therapy topics, more therapy content, just to make people more aware and just, spit some gems, give some information to you guys. I am all about therapy. I'm an advocate for therapy when it comes to healing and knowing that it's not a race, it's a journey. Okay, so I have Erica. She is my colleague, and so I'm going to have her introduce herself to you guys.
Hey everybody, I am Erica. As she said, Erica Farias, LPC. I have been in private practice for about 8 years, maybe 9 years. And I work specifically with people who deal with anxiety, depression, and some traumas of different kinds, mainly childhood trauma, based here in Houston, Texas.
All right, thank you. So I was like, I didn't want to be, topic focused tonight, but I just wanted to, just have some open dialogue. So, Erica, I know that, we as therapists, in a therapy room, what do you think is even, like, if you can describe what therapy may be like for somebody who maybe wanted to start therapy or just have some questions on, maybe what to expect that initial go round, what would you say in so many words?
The way I would describe therapy is it's like you said before, it is definitely a journey. It's not a race, it's not a sprint. because we have to go, beneath the surface to some things that sometimes it's uncomfortable to deal with. And I think a lot of times people think that therapy is advice giving, and we actually don't give advice. We don't give you hardly any advice. But what we do is we help get you to the place where you can kind of advise yourself, or you can get to a point where you can empower and encourage yourself. So I think what I would describe, how I would describe therapy is it is a journey to self empowerment, so that you can get to the healing, to the healthy place or the wealthy place that you are destined to be in your life.
Okay. No, like I think that that's good because you said like to like the wealthy place. And I kind of like took on like this little like slogan, if you would say, where I was like, healing is wealthy. That's just like being like wealthy because
Health is
once
wealth.
right, it is because once you start like the healing process, I think you start to unpack like so many layers. And I think that is a good thing to kind of like talk about too. Like when you even are beginning like the therapy process, and then what begins to happen. Like I don't know how it is for you, but like after that first session, my clients were like, they're like, initially they may come in for like one topic, one reason that right, like got them, or like an event that got them into the therapy room, right? But like
Right.
once you start like asking
Start
them questions,
peeling back some stuff. I have a disclaimer that I tell people in the first session. I always tell them, just to make sure you are fully prepared for what you're getting yourself into. Sometimes it feels worse before it feels better,
absolutely,
because we have to pull up
absolutely.
stuff that you didn't want to really deal with. And so I always caution people that, and it's like, yeah, you came in here for this, but we start peeling back the layers of, well, how'd you get there? Where did this come from? You're like, oh, I didn't even know that was a thing. So yeah, it's real.
um so even like in the realness, right? Like you like, okay, as a therapist, you never want to deter, right? And I think you don't ever want it to be like kind of like heavy, but like sometimes you just can't help it. Like it's just like, as you start like asking questions, and then you have some clients that even when they come into therapy, they might not really know why they want therapy.
Mhm.
Like, have you had those clients that's like,
I
no, like I like,
I'm
and
here.
they like, I know I need to start, or somebody recommended it. Like what do you
I just
like
kind of
what?
let them explore, like, what else could there be. So if somebody else recommended that you come, well, what is it that they see that you don't see? What do you think they might be recommending? Because I have had it where they're like, I'm here. Hey.
Yeah, and that's good because it's like you may not have like multiple reasons, or you may not have like a lot of trauma, but like that, okay, I just need a safe place to like talk. I just need to unpack. I just need to, hey, my friends ain't doing it no more, my man ain't doing it no more, my woman ain't doing it no more, like my
Or
siblings.
they can only take you so far.
They're right there. That can only take you so far. Because it's like, okay, you've made it so far even yourself for so
Right.
long, right? And like you said, like they can only take you, so far. Like what do you think usually like gets people like in the therapy room? Like what do you think even happens where like, okay, they like, you know what, I'm gonna go to a therapist.
Usually, you probably see the same thing too. Usually it's to the point where whatever it is, I can't handle it anymore on my own. I have done all the things that I know how to do. My friends are tired of hearing about it. My man is tired of hearing about it. My mama is tired of hearing about it. I don't know what else to do. I need some help or some guidance. And two, a lot of people come because they have that preconceived notion that we are going to give them advice. So a lot of times they come, looking for an answer, like I do. And so I think a lot of times that what gets them in the room is, I don't know what to do and I don't know where to go.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that a lot as well, that no one really understands what they're going through. Maybe they have, you know, ran out of all other options, and like you said, they can only get them so far. And it's like, even the people are like, well, I don't know what to do, like I don't know what to tell you,
I
like,
don't know
you
what
know,
to tell
maybe
you.
they may be tired. You know how they be like, well, I don't know, like I mean, I don't know what to tell you. You know, we're human, right, outside of the therapy room, and like we have those friends where we like, friend, like I don't really know, like maybe you need to go talk to somebody, right? And so that's where us as the professionals, like we come in, because we're unbiased. And
Right.
it is always good to have an unbiased perspective when it comes to just like dealing with things, also unpacking. And I know even how both of us work is that like we you know, like we be saying stuff, you know, like, and we be like unpacking, and we be like going through the layers and all of that different type of stuff. And so so kind of going back to like, for me, when clients, I'm like, okay, you know how you hear certain stuff as a therapist, but you never want to make an assumption. Yet
Mm-hmm.
you just kind of know what it sounds like. You just
Where
know,
it's
like,
going. Yeah.
you just know, like, I believe that is this, right? And then we kind of give them the language of what is going through, what they're going through. And so I'm not, my first sessions, we're asking questions, we're getting them in the room, and they're unpacking, right? And then we're just like helping them even in that first session, like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, help to even define, like, what do you want out of therapy? Like, what does that process even look like? What do you even like expect?
What do
And
you
a
expect?
lot of
Yeah.
times they may have one goal, right? And then for some people, they may be like, well, I want this. So I give it like by 2 or 3 sessions, and then I revisit. Well,
Mm-hmm.
what do you feel like your goals are now? And they're like,
Not that.
I don't even know no more. I just want to be healed. Like I just want healing. Like I'm ready just to like deal with all of it. So what are some things that you feel like not feel, but what do you think are reasons that you can kind of like just give where people seek counseling in the first place? Like what are some things that you see in your practice that are like those primary things that people come to therapy for, and maybe what people don't realize that they maybe should like start, going to therapy for?
So the first part of your question, the thing that I see when people do come to therapy is because the thing that's bothering them or what's coming to the surface is now starting to interfere with their daily functioning. So I can't think straight, I'm stressed out, I'm not performing in my job, I'm having issues with my spouse or my partner, I'm yelling at my kids. So like there is now an outward um display of what's happening inside that they probably have been dealing with the inside thing for a really long time, and they didn't even maybe realize it because they have dealt with it for so long. A lot of times this has been stuff that's following people for so long, and they have just lived with it. They don't even recognize it to be a problem until either one, somebody else is recognizing it as a problem because it's interfering with relationships, or they just can't function the way, I'm not who I used to be, or I used to be, this happy, cheerful kind of person. And now I'm finding myself not interested in hanging with people. I'm isolated. I don't want to talk to people, or, it's just, there's something different. And they
Yeah.
may or may not always have the language for it, but they recognize like something's different. That's one. Another thing is where some people do have the emotional intelligence to recognize it, but they don't know how to deal with it. So they haven't had the tools. They have not been set up for success to help them
Yeah.
figure it out. They know, I can clearly tell something is wrong. I don't know what's wrong, and I don't know what to do about it. So those are typically the two. But even for people who think they need to come in, or you don't know if you need to come in, one of the ways I would say that what would tell you that you need to speak to somebody is if things are getting outside of what you think you can manage. So if you know you're stressed and you starting to snap at people, and you're having panic attacks, or you can't think straight, your productivity is decreasing, those kind of things where you can see that there's a significant difference and it's outside of what you yourself can manage, or like, oh, I talked to my best friend and that's not working, she don't even answer the phone no more. Like whatever. This can't help you. So, when you see things like that and you start to see like there are problems, noticeable problems, or just some sort of disturbance, I would say maybe come in for that. And to be honest, people really come to therapy for more than just like the things that people come to therapy for. It varies so widely. Like it could
Yeah.
literally just
Yeah.
be anything. And everybody, another question that I get typically is like, how long is this supposed to last? How long am I supposed to
Ooh.
be here? And it
That's a
really
good
just
one.
it depends on whatever you came in for. Like what's the depth of. I've worked with some people for like 6 years straight,
Yep,
and I've worked with
absolutely.
some people for 6 weeks straight,
Yeah.
and they're good. And so
Yep.
it just depends on what you're coming for, what's the see um as the primary issue. And then depending on what we uncover after we look at your primary issue, that will determine what you really need and how long you need to be in there.
Yes, I like that. That was really good because you're like, well, how long? I think that is like the primary like question, like, well, how long, will I be in therapy? Like, how long will this take? And I'm like, and sometimes even with that question comes, okay, well, what do I need to do? Well, what do I need to do to fix it? And sometimes it's just not a cookie cutter answer. It's not just
Slow down.
right. It's not just okay, if you do step A and then you do step B, then that's gonna get you to C, and then it's all done. Like, no,
Mhm.
it doesn't work like that. And I think, some people can even get deterred, and like discouraged even sometimes because right, you have those people who may be very A type, or they're very, solution focused, and
Mhm.
right, they want to see immediate results. And it's like, well, this this is a lot to unpack. This is changing your mindset, which is not easy. It also means changing behavior and then being consistent, but then
Mm.
also knowing that your life is affected by other people and other situations.
Right.
So yes, you can change, but what happens when you encounter these issues right back into the world? It's different when you're in a safe place, in a safe environment, to talk, to unpack. But again, that can take weeks, that can take months, that can take years. And one thing that I know is the same issue we probably, dealt with 6 months ago, a year or two later,
Mhm.
is coming back up in a different way.
Right.
Have you?
Yes, I tell people all the time, like I give them upfront within the first 2 sessions. Look, this is the approach that I take. Does this fit with what you're looking for? Yes or no? Because I don't, we look for the root. I'm not very big on like let's put a band-aid
Yeah,
on this gunshot wound because you're gonna be bleeding again in about 2 weeks.
yeah,
Because you did not deal with what is the root cause of the issue. You only dealt with the symptom of the issue. And so I just told a client the other day, it's no different than, if you have a cough. Well, you can take a cough drop and you can do, whatever. But at some point, we got to figure out why the cough is there in the first place. Is it the
yeah,
flu? Is it COVID? We got to get to the root of it. Otherwise, you're going to keep the cough and it's going to get worse. And so it's no different than, you may come in here because, well, I can't sleep. Well, let's get to the root of that. Well, look, sir, ma'am, you're anxious all day. Your brain has not shut off. You can't stop overthinking and you're doing all this and it's causing you not to be able to sleep. Well, then let's look at what's making you so anxious. And so I always tell people it takes a while, not a while, but it does take some work to get to the root. And sometimes people are very surprised at what the root of their problem
yeah,
actually is because it's not
yeah,
something that they have ever considered or explored.
yeah. That is so true. And also, for me, I always go back to childhood. That's just the type of work that I do. That I go back to
Mhm.
like root issues, like childhood things, and that's just my basis of how I do my therapy.
Right.
And a lot of times, adults don't be want to go back. Like they be like, what they got to do with
They don't
anything?
see the relevance.
They think that it's so irrelevant. Like, oh, I'm older now. Like, yeah, I understand that. my parents, yeah, I didn't have to, they try to like justify it
That
and,
happened when I was 5. What? I'm 45. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
they did the best they can. Yeah, I had a hard life, but hey, everybody got to, somebody, it ain't gonna be perfect. And then I'm like, okay. And then as we start to you go in a little deeper, well, where did that come from? Well, how did you think that got there? And my question is, when did the first time you experienced that? And I said,
Mm-hmm.
even if you gotta go back to when
Go
you
back as
were
far as you can remember.
as
Mm-hmm.
far as you can remember. And that's when you get them, right? That's when it's like, oh,
When I
yeah,
was 6
I
years
was
old.
bullied. I was right. Or it may be anything. It may be abuse of households. It may be coming from very dysfunctional families.
Mm-hmm.
It can be from hyper religious families, controlling parents. It can just stem from a lot of things. We do have a question, and so the
Okay.
question is, how can you identify the root from a therapeutic standpoint?
You want me to answer it?
So that's the question that we have. So and if you want to chime in, you can.
Mm-hmm.
I would say how you can identify the root is to start to backtrack. And so just the question that we said, like when, like as far as you can remember, like going back when you first remembered that feeling. One of the things I tell people is you may not think that they relate or is relatable
Mm-hmm.
because they're completely different circumstances. But what I have to tell people is, what about the feeling?
Right.
Because you get triggered by the emotion and the feeling, right? And it feels similar. That's why you're triggered the way you're triggered. Hint, hint. I don't know who that was
Mm-hmm.
for, but right. That's why you're triggered the way you are, because that feeling, that emotion you felt before. And so then you have to kind of go back and start backtracking, like things. And that's how you start to like really start to get to like the root of like the issues. Why you are
Mm-hmm.
the way you are. Are you emotional? Non-emotional? Are you numb? What happened? When did you realize you started being different? So kind of comparing when things change, and then life, circumstances, life events happens as well that alters a lot of things in our lives. What do you think?
So, same girl.
Same
So
thing. Okay.
same, but the one question I asked them is what. So if they're triggers, I always tell people where there's a trigger, there's a wound. Where there's no trigger, you have healed in that area. So nothing can
Hold
trigger
on. Say
you.
that where there's a trigger. Say that one more time. Run it
Where
back.
there's a trigger, there's a wound. If there is no wound, there is no trigger. So that thing wouldn't bother you if there was not something that needed to be addressed from way back. And so I always ask them, okay, so this thing reminded you of what? What did it remind you of? And then what emotions come up as a result of that? And so you said to backtrack. So I always ask them, okay, what does it remind you of? They may take them a minute because sometimes they don't, like you said, they don't make the connection between,
Yeah.
you know, A and B.
Yeah.
But I give them some space to do that. What does this remind you of? And then what emotion does that bring up? And that usually is the point right there where they're like, man, like, okay, that I feel betrayed. I feel, left out. I feel rejected. I feel hurt. And then, okay, so what's the thought that led you to that emotion?
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
did you get to the emotion? And then when you start tracing back your thoughts, it will lead you back to the relevance of whatever point A was to how that relates to whatever you have going on in your current life. And then they're able to make those connections like, oh, okay, well, I might be dealing with some unforgiveness
Yeah.
towards this person, or when this person, when my mom did this, it reminds me of this in my relationship now. And I'm recognizing that this is a stress point for me and I can't
Yeah.
really deal with XYZ. So I
Yeah.
always do. I think the question was, how do you identify the root? You
Uh-huh.
literally backtrack. And I always start with, what does it remind you of? And then what's the emotion? And then what's the thought? And then another thing that I tell people is sometimes, we may not be able to see the relevance, and they always say like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm babbling, I'm just saying stuff. And I'm like, no, I'm making connections. Like in anything,
Yeah.
you can tell me I ate pizza for dinner last night. I'm gonna figure out What does
Yeah.
that piece have to do with, some childhood memory that you have? And so I think just being open to there being some relevance to things that
Yeah.
we think are not relevant can help
Hmm.
you get to the root of your what's bringing you to therapy.
Absolutely. Okay, this next question is, what if you can't remember your childhood? Like,
Mm,
how do you even like go back? I mean,
it's actually
you
more
do you want
common
to?
than people think. It's more common than people think, and usually that's a trauma response. So if there's certain things,
Yeah.
you see it a lot with people who deal with PTSD.
Uh-huh.
And it doesn't matter what the traumatic event was. If it was traumatic enough for you, for your brain to perceive it as a threat, there is a chance that you might not remember much of it. And so this is what we will call, sometimes it could be, depending on the circumstances, it could be disassociation or dissociation, where you're physically there, but you checked out, like your brain
Yeah.
is not there, and
Yeah.
that's a means of protection. Or it could be that your mind has repressed and suppressed bad memories so much so because your brain perceives them as a threat. And so
Mm.
why would my brain hold on to something that it thinks is going to hurt me?
Like
It's meant
danger, danger.
Right. It's meant to protect me. And so one of the things that I do teach people is with trauma, once you have endured any kind of trauma, it doesn't matter what type of trauma it is, sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, it could be a robbery. Whatever the trauma is, when your brain is scanning for threats, your brain detects a threat the same way somebody could be holding a gun to your head right now is the same threat of someone hurting your feelings. It's your brain does not see the difference. It literally is a threat, and
Mhm.
it's seeking to neutralize the threat. And so this is why we see people who just cannot remember the details of things. They may remember the beginning of something and maybe the end, but they may need a reminder of something that happened. And so when you can't remember some certain things of your childhood, sometimes it takes to go it takes some work with your therapist, but you have to be able to go back and allow them to gently lead you back down those steps so that certain things can start to jog your memory. Because if you can't remember it, it's usually because your brain has tried to protect you from the harm of the memory.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's I think the second part of that question was like, how would you even go back that far? Well, you can only go for as far back as you remember, right?
Mhm.
You can't process what you don't remember, and that's why you have to stick it out and stick through it and start to unpack.
Right.
Because once you start to unpack, then you start to, the process is to hopefully heal. And then as you begin to get more aware of why you do the certain things, then it's like you have to even get to a place of restoring back, how to feel again, how to respond to triggers, not being as easily, triggered. And so knowing that you
Mhm.
have trauma responses because of the trauma, and knowing, oh wow, like that was a trauma response. And then as you start going back, it's kind of like you are letting your brain know that it's safe. It's kind of like
Okay.
we have to rewire the brain to say that it's okay. That's why even thinking about it, for some people is so traumatic, and you
Mhm.
find yourself getting really anxious, overwhelmed, or even for some people, they just deflect, right? They
Mhm.
won't talk about it. It's okay if you're not ready to talk about it. And some people believe that they're ready to talk about it, and they may not be ready to.
Mhm.
Or it may be time and you're steady avoiding, right,
Right.
the elephant in the room, or the big thing that needs to be addressed. And so, with your therapist is, finding a way, and when it's time to like start to really, really unpack as well. Um yeah. Okay. The next question, if you have so much trauma to deal with, how do you go about talking to your therapist to get through it all, like in a structured way?
Um, I say, to that, who says it has to be in a structured way? Because sometimes part of our trauma response would be to control things, right? So that we feel safe. And certainly I can see how wanting, okay, if I'm going to have to talk about this traumatic stuff, I need it to be on my terms so that I feel comfortable. And your therapist will acknowledge those things. They will try to make you as comfortable as possible. And the big thing I always say is, the more I studied working with clients with trauma is you have to be able to give them tools to self-regulate first. Because if you start taking them deep and they can't self-regulate, they're not gonna come back. And then two, it's too much for them. You have overloaded them and they don't have the tools to deal with that just yet. So you have to prepare them. You can't just go like, tell me about your sexual abuse when you were 5 years old. Like you cannot take the client straight
It's like,
into it. Yeah, you can't do that to them like that.
slowly, slowly deal with it,
Mhm.
slowly, start to make changes. A lot of times, even, as we're giving, tools to self-regulate and, just some coping skills, sometimes, clients may want to go out and I'll say exercise, those
Mhm.
skills, or immediately start setting boundaries, or they feel that, hey, I did a few sessions, so I'm okay. And then
Yeah.
they find themselves trying to reintegrate back with their families, or, the things that trigger them. And then they find out, oh, I'm not ready. Like, you didn't re-trigger yourself. And,
Mhm.
and hey, that was great, that you did that you made an attempt. But a lot of times you don't have to rush even that process, right? Of
Yeah.
like going back, mingling with those people, whoever it may be. Sometimes healing means I gotta go on a healing journey. That's why it's a journey. And it may
Mhm.
be like an isolating journey, that you just may have to just do for yourself, because it's going to also help you begin to see a little bit more clearly.
Mhm.
It's going to help you, in that overall process when you're taking the steps to getting better.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I
Yeah.
think the part that you said that I think is important too is sometimes you have to separate people, situations, and then too, as you grow in therapy, as you start to heal and recover and have some restoration brought to your life, you will see like you just don't fit in certain situations anymore. You don't even want to
Ooh.
be a part of them. So if you find yourself, you know, still trying to go back around, like you said, like now I'm re-triggering myself, it's because you still have not healed yet and you still want the thing you're craving the thing that has hurt you.
That is so juicy. I'm like, ooh, 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 ooh. Okay, look, can we kind of switch and go into like,
Let's go.
relationships, you can crave the thing that hurts you. And this could be like friends, relationships. So we'll do a little bit of both. But one question that I ask, when people even come in with their relationships, and I ask them, do you think that, because they be like, okay, should I leave? Should I stay? Should I leave? Should I stay? Should I leave? Should I stay? And the question that I ask them, if they're, I'll say, unmarried, I would ask them, would you have chose this person if you were healed and whole?
But do they even know what healed and whole feels like?
That
To
they don't
know.
they don't know. But I think when I do ask that question, they still know that I'm not all the way there. And I don't think that I would pick this
Mhm.
person if I was my best self.
Yeah.
And so I think that
Yikes.
challenges them. It's like, ooh, like, did I
Mhm.
settle? Like, and like, again, we crave the thing that how did you word it?
I don't know, girl.
I think you crave the thing,
You
that
crave the
like
thing
hurt
that
you,
hurts you, I
that's like
think.
wounded,
Yeah.
but also like, why? We're dealing with attachment issues. We're
Mhm.
dealing with rejection issues. We're dealing with abandonment issues.
And it's not because when you start to heal, you don't want that thing anymore. And if that's to simplify it, when you start losing weight and you start changing your diet and you start cutting out sugar and you start seeing like I'm getting kind of fine, I look kind of good. I don't want this Snickers. Like you're not looking at the cakes and the pies and stuff. You don't want it. Your whole appetite is changing because it's no longer serving you. It's not healthy. It's not giving you the desired outcome that you want. It sets you back.
Hey, but it's comfort. It tastes good.
But we don't want to be big backs in the streets. You get it together. You don't want it. And so then this is where you start outgrowing some of those relationships. You see, like, you know what? I used to go around, but I'm not that same girl that this is not we're gonna work for me. It's not serving me. And then you just start to see like that's when you can see your progress. Like,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
I don't even have the desire to be here anymore. I don't have
Yeah,
the
when you
desire to deal with
tired.
that.
I think when you tired and you start saying like this ain't right, or you start changing, right? And then the person that you're always going around, the unhealthy person,
Mm-hmm.
you like, you take like a second look, like,
You
hold on,
been
like,
like that?
I can say it was me, in the beginning. Maybe it was me. But
Mm-hmm.
now I'm working on myself. I think it's you. Or
Yeah,
then you figure out like, oh, this ain't really what I want.
I don't want this.
Because
Yeah.
this is one thing that I think a lot of people don't realize too, that in the healing process, like what you said, you don't you realize that that's not really what I want. But also knowing that you have to rediscover what you want. You got to rediscover who you are,
Your whole self.
your
Yeah.
whole self, because you're like, I didn't build my whole
I'm a
life,
new person. Yeah.
off of my trauma, off of, my circumstances. I built this thing up and I've always been this way. So that it became so normalized that once you really start to like really start changing and doing
And
things
think about
different.
too, you are with those same people, right? The same thing that you were craving. You don't see the new version of yourself because everybody around you looks like you, or they look
Ooh,
like your trauma, or they look like what you're
mama
used
bonding.
to. And so now I'm a whole new creation, and I don't know myself yet. I have to get to know the new version of me. What does she like? Who,
Yeah.
what kind of stuff she want to
Mhm.
get into? And it's self-discovery. So even after you get to a point of healing, even with in therapy, we should be encouraging people to get out and get to know
Yeah.
themselves,
Yeah.
understand who you are and what you want. Because if you don't ever get to that point, self-actualization, where you get to understand who you are, what you want, what's important to you, what you value, it kind of is easy for you to be stuck in an old pattern that's not serving you just because it's familiar.
And right, just because you're comfortable as well. And it's like, why am I even continuing to do this? Like, it's not
Hmm.
serving me. And so that's when you, I think, make that conscious decision to say, you know what, this is no longer serving me. This relationship is no longer serving me. And then
Right.
that, and that's when you, right, begin to behaviorally, right, make the change and do things different, because now you've identified that no, I really don't need this. And then, right, you're not people pleasing, you're not worried about
Right.
people pleasing, you're not worried about making anybody else happy. Like, you're only worried about your peace and your happiness.
Hmm.
Okay.
And you
So
know what, too? I think some people think that that's selfish. They get to the
I was
point where
just
that is hard. It's hard for them to get to that point because if they have been dealing with people pleasing, for example, then they think, and I see the question about rejection. So this kind
yeah,
of goes in with that. So they have this idea that, I have to conform to what other people want or what they think or, whatever. And you've been people pleasing for so long. When you decide not to, or when you decide to put up some boundaries, a lot of times they will feel so uncomfortable with that because they think it's rude, they think it's mean, or this person's going to think that.
yeah,
But at some point, you do have to prioritize your own peace and your
yeah,
own health, because who else was doing that for you?
nobody. Yeah. When you were, just saying it, it made me think too that why it's even hard for people to start putting up boundaries, and why, some people are like, well, I tried and they still did it. But you went your whole life with people
No
pleasing,
boundaries.
yeah, and no boundaries, that when it's time and when you're actually like nobody's taking you serious, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I tell people that you have to make sure that you're reiterating your boundaries, and then also people gotta learn this new you that's
The
setting
new you,
boundaries. Like
yeah.
that, people like, oh, you're changing, you're this, you're that. I was like, you are, because to them, you're the one who changed up. They didn't switch it up.
Mm-hmm.
You're the one who switched it up. You're the
And
one
they
that
benefited from you when you didn't have any boundaries. It was something that was beneficial for them when you didn't have any.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Man, that's good. That's good. I do have a question
Okay.
that I want to present. Um, it is, how often should somebody take time to like pause and check in with themselves?
I don't think there is a wrong answer for that. I mean, unless they're not doing it, at all. But I think you can do it every day. I think you can do it several times a day. I think
Mhm,
it depends on what, if you're going through a particularly hard season, if you need to check in with yourself every couple of hours, whatever it is that you need to do for yourself to make sure self is okay,
yeah,
I say do that. And then even, I would even say if you have somebody that you trust, you know they may check on you already, but you can call them and say, hey girl, check on me in an hour and see
right. Look,
see if
be
I'm
my
okay,
accountability.
see if
Be
I'm
my
if I'm okay,
accountability.
see what I'm doing,
It's check in. Check with
yeah.
me a week. What do you think? Like, what parts of a person's like healing journey do you feel like is in their control?
Ooh, say that one.
That's like a deep question. Yeah,
Ask
that's a
me one
deep
more time.
question. I would say, if I had to give a percentage, I would say maybe 70%. I would say 70% is inside your control, 30% is outside of your control.
Okay,
Why?
break it
Because,
down.
oh, look, why? Because because some things are like, you can only control so much.
Mhm.
You can only control so much. But sometimes that can flip too, like, so I wouldn't be set on that. But I would say that you can only control so much. You can't control other people, but a lot of this is on you, whether or not you choose to heal, whether you choose to allow people to affect you.
Okay, I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know, what would you say? What would your thoughts be?
I don't know if I have a percentage though.
Yeah, I don't know. Like,
Um,
that's hard because it's some things that's like, it is fully in your control, and you can't worry
100%.
about what other people, and it's like, I just think it's situational. Like, I'll say that. I
Yeah,
think
I
it's
think
just
I think
situational.
it's situational, and I think too it depends on. I hate to use the word willingness, but I will say your willing and your ability, because
I like that.
sometimes you can be willing but you don't necessarily always have the tools to get where you need to go. I mean, that's what therapy is for. But let's say before you have your first session or whatever the
Yeah.
case is, and then when you get into therapy and you're getting the tools, now you're able, but are you willing? Because sometimes it's hard. Like, people, I think people don't they really don't take into account you, whatever that thing is that you came in for, even if it's a surface level situation, and if it has deeper roots, you have to think about those roots have been growing with you for as long as you've been growing. So it's not a like, oh, I went
Easy.
to therapy 2 weeks and
Yeah.
my whole life has changed. No, you gotta
Yeah.
you got to keep doing some work. And so now you have the tools, but is it more than you can manage? I have had people to get to a certain point where it was uncomfortable for them and they decided to no longer continue. And then it's
Mhm.
like, well, your healing stops, because it is too hard for you to manage. But I promise you, if you match with a good therapist, if you match with somebody who teaches you how to have self-compassion, you will not be so hard on yourself. That's probably one of the things that I would say keeps a lot of people from going as far as they can go, is that they are very hard on themselves, and they're very critical. And then they are holding themselves to like a really unrealistic expectation of what their own
Mhm.
healing should look like, or whatever it is. But we have to extend grace even to ourselves. Hey, that's a lesson I'm learning. You have to extend grace to yourself, because it is a new skill that you're learning. It's a new way to exist. It's a new way to solve problems. It's new and you don't know it yet. So you have to be able to allow yourself to have a hiccup every now and then, and just, pull
Mhm.
yourself up, get back to it. But you have to be willing. Like, are you willing? You may be able, but not willing. You may be willing, but not able.
I mean, I think you answered that, because you better be like, look, you be okay. I need to deal with this, but then the next week something happened, and you like, I ain't ready to deal with that. Like, look, this is my issue this week, and and so we therapists, we just go through life with you. Like, I don't know
Mhm,
about you, but I just go through life with my clients, and I'm like,
mhm.
okay, we was on that, we was working on that, but now a more issue, a more present issue has presented itself,
We
and so
can
now
pause on this for this week, but
let's
please
pause
know
on
we
that.
coming back.
And then I'll add too that it can be emotionally and mentally draining
Draining. Mhm.
to unpack everything, like your whole life.
I
You
do let them
25,
take a little
35.
break, but I tell them we coming back. Don't forget, I didn't forget. We are coming back. I want to see you heal just as much as you want to be healed.
Yeah, it can be emotionally and mentally draining, and then we just know that, okay, you can't rush it, you can't overdo it. Like, you'll get to the point where you didn't process so much that you want to check out. You like,
Mhm,
give me a couple of weeks, give me a month. I'm ready to come back.
mhm. We still here when you're ready. When you're ready.
We're still here. Um, I'm trying to see if there's any other questions that anybody else have before I kind of get into wrapping up. So this is like the last question that I have. What advice can you give people when it comes to giving themselves grace and having some self-compassion on this healing journey?
You said, what advice can I give them for
Yeah, what
that?
advice? Yeah, like just to extend themselves grace and just to give them, like, just to have self-compassion for, all the
Um,
they've been going through.
I would say I do this exercise with people, and I'm telling you, nobody, not one person has ever been able to do it to completion, right? I will have them, depending on what it is, it could be a therapy session. I've done it at workshops, things like that, where I have them bring a picture of themselves as a kid. Don't matter how old, baby picture, little kid, teenager, whatever. And a lot of times we deal with people, especially when they have anxiety and depression, things like that, even in the childhood trauma, they have a lot of negative self-talk. And so I will tell them, we're trying to drill in, like, be compassionate with yourself, be gracious, like, tell your, don't speak to yourself like that. And sometimes it's just they have been so used to adopting somebody else's critical voice that they become so critical of themselves. So I tell them to bring this picture, and then I'll tell them, like, can you say the same things you tell yourself, these negative things you speak to yourself? I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, blah, whatever it is. Can you say that to that little kid in that picture? Nobody can, not one
Pretty
person.
sure I would be bawling. Like,
It's never a dry eye, like, keep the tissues ready, because nobody can ever do it. And so I always tell them, you are still that same person. That same person is still inside of you. If
yep,
you
that
can't
little
talk
boy,
to
that little girl.
the little girl, the little boy, if you can't talk to a kid like that, do not speak to yourself like that. You are still the same person. You still need love. You still need compassion. You still need grace. And so when I do that with them, And whoever that's for on the line, take that and run with it. But whenever I do that with them, it really brings home the message of being gracious towards yourself, because how can you expect change when you don't allow for falling in the change, or a mistake or a mishap or an accident or whatever in the change. And then you think about it, when you hurt, usually it's somebody else's voice that they have
Yeah,
adopted that is
yeah,
that critical.
yeah.
And when you ask them, like, well, when you would hear, is your dad's voice, your mom, your grandmother, whoever, when that person used to speak to you like that, what did it make you feel? And it's never encouragement. It's never I can do it, I'm gonna be okay. It's never any of those things. And so you have to drive home that message of, okay, this is now how you're speaking to yourself. What would be a more gracious response to self? What would be a more compassionate, more loving, more patient response to self?
Yeah.
And so I would say the best advice I could say is, if you would not tell your childhood self that, don't tell your adult self that. Um, and if it's not, there is a such thing as toxic positivity. But if the way you're speaking to yourself is not going to motivate you to get to the healed version of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
maybe go back and start, trying to correct and reframe some of those things that you're telling yourself, because they don't lend to the new version of yourself that you are trying to be.
Absolutely. If anything is only stopping, preventing, hindering you from moving forward. And at
Right.
that point, it becomes self-inflicted wounds,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes, right, you can still be in situations where the person may be doing it, but if it's all on self, if it's negative self-talk, then you're not being kind to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You're not being kind to yourself. You're not, like you say, giving yourself grace and compassion and being patient in the process. And with this healing journey, you have to exercise those things. You
You
have to
need
give
it.
yourself grace. It's not a race. It's not a race. It's not something that just because you've decided to do it today, don't mean that all of your problems are going to go away tomorrow or this year. You are just deciding to be better every
Mm-hmm.
day. Like we said, self-reflection, every day, every hour, just at any moment of time where you need to sit back, self-reflect, and reconsider your life, especially if there's some things that you need to change, especially if maybe some issues are coming up. If you don't really like your life, or you don't really like,
Mm-hmm.
do you sit in it? Do you just allow life to just take you take you, or do you step up? Do you take control? And do you take, I've been, that word authority just been with me. You like, do you take that authority back of your life? And that it goes back to like what we're talking about. Taking authority back is having that control in that way of your healing journey, that
Right.
you have the control to take your authority back and not allow the situation, the trauma, to keep you. Sometimes we will never forget, but do
Right.
you allow it to continue to rule and control your life?
Yeah.
And so that's all we have. I want you guys to join us here every 2 weeks at the same time, at 8 o'clock. We're going to be on here. We're going to be, having conversations. We're going to be, just doing things, all things therapy. And so I like to talk about, different topics, and have, I'm going to have guest speakers on, and just, provide a space. I think we just need to hold more space as therapists, as, practitioners. We're agents of change, agents of healing. That's what we do. And a lot of times, people may not always want to get into the therapy room, and so I'm just providing a platform just to make it vocal. And so again, I'll see you guys in 2 weeks, and thank you for joining. Bye bye.
Mhm.